Lysis by Miss Nihilist. Chapter 3, Phase 2, Penetration. Following attachment of the virus particle on the target cells, the next step is the penetration into the cytoplasm. Ben reached over and silenced his alarm right before it could go off. He rolled over to glare out his window at the bright sun and the cheery blue sky. He hadn't slept very well last night and had been tossing and turning fitfully for hours now. Suffice it to say, sunrise had come far too soon. Unfortunately, Ben couldn't rewind time so that he could get more sleep. Not without using Alien X anyway. He rubbed his tired eyes and forced himself to get out of bed and get ready for the day. He stepped out of the bathroom after his shower and walked into the dining room. Dad wasn't there, but he could hear Mom's blender whirring in the kitchen. "Morning," Ben said as he went over to the pantry. "Check it out, Mom. I managed to brush my hair all by myself today," he joked. Sandra didn't reply. Ben rifled through the pantry for a health bar, at least it was chocolate-flavored, and tore off the wrapper. He snapped the bar in two and popped half of it into his mouth. "Did Dad leave already?" "Yes," Mom said shortly. "He was in a hurry this morning."
"Cool."
Ben chewed and swallowed. He threw the wrapper away and crammed the second half of the bar in right after the first. Sandra turned and wrinkled her nose at him. "It's bad enough that you have to dress like a pig. Do you really need to eat like one, too?" Ben choked. He struggled to swallow down bits of granola and chocolate chips, and when he finally stopped coughing and could speak again, Mom had already left the kitchen. Ben couldn't even be upset by her comment. He was too shocked that something so mean had left his mom's mouth. Sometimes Sandra could get frustrated with him or Carl, sure, but she was never the type to call people names. He glanced down at his shirt. There were bits of granola stuck near his collar. Ben brushed the crumbs away, struggling to ignore the uncomfortable, squirming feeling in his stomach that was put there by Mom's words. It felt a lot like shame. "There must be something in the tap water," Ben muttered to himself. He wanted to go after his mom and ask why she had said that to him, but he could hear the shower running and knew she wouldn't be out anytime soon. A part of Ben didn't really want to see her anyway. He stepped outside and onto his front porch. The proto-truck wasn't there, which was fine because Ben didn't really want to see Rook either. He sat down on the step and held his head in one hand, lost in thought. It could simply be a case of bad days and worse timing, but a nagging feeling in Ben's gut made him doubt it. Rook and his mom were acting weird now. Coincidences in Ben's life were hardly ever just that. Ben couldn't think of anything he might have done to change their opinions of him so dramatically, and if something had happened to put his mom in such a rancid mood, Dad would have let Ben know. A buzz from Ben's back pocket drew his attention to his phone. He pulled it out and opened the text he just received. It was from Elena, just a normal, "Hope you slept well," smiley face, good morning text. At least she wasn't acting any different. Ben shot off a quick reply before he noticed what time it was. It was already 5 minutes past when Rook should have picked him up for patrol. Rook was never late. Ben considered for a second that something was wrong, then he rolled his eyes. Rook was probably refusing to pick him up on purpose. He tapped on the Omnitrix and used its plumber-integrated features to call Rook. His call buzzed a few times and then went to voicemail, indicating that Rook had seen the caller ID and purposefully chosen to ignore it. He sighed. It looked like Rook was still in his bad mood from the day before. Grandpa had promised to help him out with that, and even if he hadn't, Ben didn't want to go on patrol if Rook was going to act the way he was. So instead of using his car to do the route himself, Ben used the Omnitrix to transform into Big Chill. A powerful flap of his wings sent him into the sky, and Big Chill flew towards the plumber base. When Ben arrived, he used the guest entrance that was disguised as Max's plumbing. He tapped his foot impatiently as the elevator slowly carried him down into the main hub. His bad mood only got worse when, as soon as he stepped into the base proper, a plumber walking by slammed into his shoulder. Ben opened his mouth to apologize, only for the Haporia to growl at him and keep walking. "Geez, is everyone in a bad mood?" Ben muttered under his breath. He was trying not to let it get to him, but there was a scowl on his face as he went in search of Grandpa Max. He found his grandpa at the center of the hub, giving off orders and monitoring the main screens for alerts. Ben waited until Max had finished his conversation with Jerry from Human Resources, then made his presence known. "Morning, Grandpa," Ben greeted, trying to seem more optimistic than he actually was. His paper-thin smile fell through as soon as Grandpa Max turned to look at him. Because Max's pleasant look vanished, his brows knit in frustration. There was a very genuine edge of anger to his frown, and Ben felt a chasm open in his gut. Twice was a coincidence.
"There you are, Ben."
Max was holding a thin stack of papers, and he thumbed through them, his scowl only deepening.
"I went over Rook's report from your fight yesterday. I'm very disappointed in your performance. If this is how you're going to act, Ben, I think disciplinary action might be needed."
3 times was a pattern. Ben's mouth went dry. "What?" he uttered, because it was all he could think.
"Did you already forget? Do I have to pull up the footage?"
Max pinched the bridge of his nose, letting out an irritated sigh.
Ben, you can't abandon a fight to your partner. It's bad enough that you leave all the paperwork for Rook to do, but your only strong suit is fighting, so you could at least pretend to take your responsibilities seriously.
Shame turned Ben's face and the back of his neck an ugly, splotchy red. He subconsciously hunched his shoulders, painfully aware of all the other plumbers who were present for this conversation. "That's not fair," Ben protested. It's not like I did it on purpose. And I thought you said yesterday that Rook was wrong." Max shook his head.
Making things up won't change the facts, Ben. I saw your fight with my own eyes, and Rook's report backs up exactly what I thought. You've gotten complacent. Just because you have the Omnitrix doesn't mean you can sit back and let everyone else do the work.
He flipped to a page towards the back of his stack.
I've already discussed fair punishments with Rook, and I think it's best that... Ben, get back here!
Grandpa continued to call after him, but Ben had already turned and started running. He shoved his way through the crowd that had gathered, sprinting for the elevator. The plumber base was huge, but suddenly Ben felt like he couldn't breathe. He needed to be outside. He needed to be away from whatever the fuck was happening. He burst out of Max's plumbing and onto the streets of Beltwood. The sun was shining and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, but the fresh air didn't make Ben feel any better. His legs were shaky as he jogged down the street and turned into a nearby alley. There, Ben pressed his back to the cool brick wall and forced himself to take deep breaths. He was panicking, but Ben had gotten good at controlling that over the years. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath, counting to 5 in his head. He counted to 5 again as he let it out. As he did, Ben ran his fingers over the grooves in the wall at his back. The brick biting into his palms helped ground him, and gradually, Ben felt steady enough to open his eyes and think rationally about this. Something was obviously going on. Rook, his mom, Grandpa Max. There was no way that they were all snapping at him because all 3 of them just happened to have a bad day. Ben's life didn't work that way. Maybe his loved ones had all been replaced by clones, or robots in disguise. It could be a magic spell or a neural implant, or maybe Ben was trapped in a nightmare. He had a couple of enemies who could probably pull this off. Ben just didn't understand the motive yet. Turning all of his friends against him sucked, but so far they were just being rude. They hadn't tried to attack him. If the mastermind behind this was going for a slow burn, though, then that was fine. It just gave Ben more time to work things out. His determination couldn't quite smother his fear, though. Ben had handled worse, he was sure of it, but those times he'd never had to do it alone. A thought suddenly occurred to Ben, and he jerked into motion, scrambling to pull his phone out of his pocket. He quickly found Gwen's number and dialed it. Whatever was happening, he could only pray that it hadn't gotten as far as her college. The phone rang and rang and rang, and Ben had never wanted anything as badly as he wanted to hear Gwen's voice on the other end of the line. After 6 rings, it went to voicemail. Ben cursed. Gwen was probably going to be pissed that he was interrupting her during class, but he didn't care. He immediately called again. When his second try went to voicemail too, Ben tried again. He tried again and again and again, growing more desperate and impatient all the while. Finally, though, Ben heard the other end click as Gwen answered. He opened his mouth, but Ben's cry of relief died on his tongue. "Would you take a goddamn hint already?" Gwen snapped at him, as angry as he'd ever heard her. "If I'm ignoring you, it's for a reason." She didn't let Ben reply, and immediately hung up on him. Ben's heart hammered frantically in his chest. He swallowed hard and forced himself to calm down. If it had already gotten to Gwen, then that sucked, but he had sort of been expecting it. Or maybe Gwen really was just having a bad day. Denial clawed at Ben's throat. He didn't want to fix this alone. Gwen and Kevin were his team, and with them, Ben had done the impossible before. He wasn't smart enough to do this by himself. He needed to go to Gwen's college and see her and Kevin in person. Ben needed to be sure, even if he already mostly was. Never before had he wanted so badly to be wrong about something. Ben's phone buzzed. His eyes snapped to the screen, hope filling him at the idea that Gwen had texted to apologize for her curt tone over the phone, and everything really was fine and he was just being paranoid. Unfortunately, when Ben checked, it was Elena's name in his notification bar. She had sent him a text with a picture, and Ben opened it out of habit. It was completely innocuous, just a photo from her work where a crystal prism that was hung up in the window was scattering a rainbow over the wall. "It only lasts for 5 minutes until the sun's angle is all wrong," Elena's text read. "But it's pretty, isn't it?" Ben frowned. He glanced back at the photo, then read Elena's text again. And a third time, in case he had missed anything. It was a completely normal text. There was no hint of disdain or annoyance or frustration, just something pretty and ordinary that Elena had decided to share with him. The full implications hit like a brick. Ben's heart leapt in his throat and he quickly dialed Elena's number. She answered almost immediately. "Ben, hi!" Elena sounded surprised. Is something wrong? Why are you calling? Something's going on with my friends, Ben blurted out, relieved to have someone to say it to. Can we meet up? I'll fill you in on the details in person. I just need to talk to somebody who doesn't hate me right now. Hate you? Elena repeated, taken aback. Ben could easily picture that little furrow between her brows that she got when she was confused about something. There's a Mr. Smoothies a couple blocks down from my job. Why don't we meet there in a couple of minutes? The sooner the better, Ben agreed. He would have been fine with meeting in a dumpster, honestly. The thought of smoothies right now made his stomach churn. I'll be right there, Elena said, and she hung up. With a plan in mind, Ben felt significantly better. He popped the Omnitrix up, slammed down on the dial, and, in a flash of light, accelerate was off. When they were younger and things had been less complicated, Ben had always been happy to see Elena. He had never been happier to spot her face than he was at that very moment, though. A part of him was worried that Elena's behavior would change in the time it took Ben to hang up and for her to arrive at Mr. Smoothie's. But she approached with hurried steps, and when she spotted Ben, she smiled. Ben relaxed a little. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but at least he had one thing going for him. Are you okay? Elena asked as she walked up to him. She looked him up and down, scanning for injuries. You sounded panicked over the phone. I wasn't... Ben bit his lip. Okay, yeah, maybe a little panicked, but I'm calmer now. Just kind of at a loss. Do you want to sit down and talk about it? No, I need to pace. Ben cupped his chin in one hand and stared hard at nothing in particular. My friends have been acting weird. First, Rook was being a jerk, then my mom, Grandpa Max, even Gwen. Weird how? Elena asked. Weird like, not themselves. It took Ben a moment to collect his thoughts. Mind control isn't a new concept from my rogues gallery, but I can't figure out what the goal is. If no one is attacking me or trying to take the Omnitrix, they're all just being mean. Ben was unable to keep the frustration out of his voice. Well, you don't know that it's mind control, mused Elena aloud. It could be robotic replacements, or a cloning experiment, or brainwashing, or enemies wearing ID masks, or maybe everyone is being rude because they're having a bad day. Elena shrugged helplessly. It's impossible to say, Ben. I know, but I have to pick one idea and run with it, or else... Ben didn't finish. He couldn't stand around and do nothing. He needed to be working towards a solution, because if he stopped, he would get lost in his thoughts. And if that happened, Ben wasn't sure if he would be able to start moving again. I'm going to talk to Gwen and Kevin in person, he announced. Maybe there'll be some sort of clue to tell me what's going on. I'll tag along, Elena jumped in before Ben could even think about asking her. When he made a face, she gave a careful little smile. I just thought it might be better than doing this alone. Ben hesitated. He didn't want to rush into anything with Elena. A part of him was worried about giving her the wrong idea, and the other part of him was worried about her smothering him to death like she tried to the last 2 times he had tried to see the best in her. But he didn't really have a choice. Elena wasn't affected by whatever had everyone else acting so out of character, and Ben needed that. If her behavior changed for the worst, he wanted to be there to see if something happened, or if she stayed the same, Ben would need Elena around to find out what was separating her from everyone else. And, of course, there was always a third option. He had no idea if her nanochips could control people or manipulate thoughts, but if Elena was the culprit that Ben was looking for, he would much prefer to have her where he could keep an eye on her than have to hunt her down later when everything inevitably went to shit. Guess I can't argue with that, allowed Ben. He managed to smile, and just that little gesture made Elena light up. He hid his grimace. Let's get this over with. Landing in Fredkin University, Ben reverted back to his human form and glanced to the side to make sure that Elena had followed him. She traveled as a swarm of nanochips and condensed back into her human form once she had caught up with him. Where would we find Gwen? She asked, looking over the campus. Good question. Ben held in a sigh. He really should have made an effort to memorize her schedule. At least there were plenty of students milling about for him to ask. Ben tapped a girl on the shoulder. Hey, do you know Gwen Tennyson? He asked. The girl shot him a dirty look and kept walking. Ben didn't want to take it personally, but he couldn't help noticing that no one was swarming for his attention yet. He would rather be ignored than surrounded by fans, but after the way things were going, Ben couldn't help the way that his heart raced every time he noticed a student glancing his way and then, uninterested, moving on with their day. What if it wasn't just his loved ones? What if whatever was causing this could make everyone turn against him? Ben swallowed hard. We'll find her ourselves. I'm not in a hurry. Elena gave him a sympathetic look and didn't argue. They wandered between classrooms for a bit. Ben peeked through windows and cracks in the door, looking for flashes of red hair. He ended up getting lucky. When the clock hit 9 o'clock, several classes emptied into the courtyard. While some students headed back to their dorms and others to the food truck parked on campus, Ben's eyes raked over the crowd and he finally caught sight of Gwen's familiar face. "Gwen!" Ben called out to her, taking off running in her direction. He wasn't sure if Elena was following him or not, and, for the moment, Ben didn't care. "You have no idea how relieved I am to see you. Can we talk?" As soon as Gwen turned to face him, dread sank like a stone in Ben's stomach. She was already frowning, but when their eyes locked, Gwen sneered at him. That alone was enough to stop Ben in his tracks. Even when they were kids, Gwen had never looked at him with such vitriol. "I'm going by Gwendolyn now," she said shortly. "What are you even doing here?" Ben stuttered over his words. Suddenly, he felt very, very small. "There's this problem I've been having, and I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Gwen cut him off with a groan. "Ugh, of course you have a problem. You're always making messes that I'm expected to help clean up. Well, I don't see you lining up to help me with my tuition or even my essay due tomorrow." Ben tried his best to smile. He didn't think that he succeeded. "We both know essays were never my strong suit." The glare that Gwen gave him was absolutely withering. "Leave," she ordered him. "I have more important things to do than comfort you over a spilled smoothie, Ben." Gwen turned and walked away, just like that, like he didn't mean anything to her. Like Ben meant less than nothing. A hand gently touched his arm. Startled, Ben whipped his head around to look at Elena's pained expression. He had been so absorbed by his own compounding sense of dread that he had forgotten she was there. "You can't just leave it like that," Elena urged. "You're right. Something weird is going on, Ben. You need to convince Gwen to listen to you." Ben hesitated. He wanted to, but "I don't think I can," he admitted. Frustration made his throat tight and his eyes burn. What was the point in arguing with Gwen? She wasn't herself, and Ben couldn't take the look in her eyes when she spoke to him, like he was something rather unpleasant that she'd had the misfortune of stepping in. For a moment, Elena looked defeated. Then she pulled herself together and, with newfound determination, said, "If you can't, then I will." "Elena, don't!" Ben started to argue with her, but she was already moving, lightly jogging to catch up to Gwen. "Gwen! I'm sorry, it's been a while since we last talked," Elena began, and Gwen cut her off with a huff. "You mean when you broke my leg and tried to kill my boyfriend just for getting between you and the world's most mediocre teenage boy?" Gwen retorted. She jerked her chin in Ben's direction as he caught up to them for emphasis. Elena visibly bristled, her skin rippling as her microchips twitched in aggravation. She maintained her cool, though, forcing a smile. "Yes, my behavior was very excessive back then, but I want to talk to you about something else. Ben came to me because he's noticed everyone acting weirdly, and..." "Why is it always about Ben with you?" Gwen shook her head dismissively. "You know that you could do better, right?" Ben bit back an angry retort. He knew that Gwen was just trying to get them both angry so that the conversation dissolved into a shouting match, a tactic that she had learned from her mother and always said she hated. "Come on, Gwen," he begged. Even to his own ears, Ben knew he sounded like a broken record. "You have to remember the way we were before, how close we've gotten since that summer vacation when we were 10. Doesn't your own change in behavior seem weird to you?" "I haven't changed, Ben. You're the one who's stuck in a delusion," Gwen snapped. "Why do you think I moved away from Bellwood? I had to take care of you for years because you were too incompetent to keep yourself alive." As she continued, she grew more heated, taking a step closer to Ben so that she was seething right in his face. "I was your teammate because you weren't good enough to save the world on your own, and I took the first chance I could to hand you off to someone else. That's it. Stop kidding yourself. We were never friends." And Ben knew, he knew that it was just the thing wearing Gwen's face that was talking, that it wasn't real. But her words hurt like she had shoved a knife between his ribs, right below his heart, and was twisting it. "That's not true," he tried, but his conviction wavered with his voice. "We're best friends, Gwen. We take care of each other. We love each other. The part of you who remembers that has to still be in there somewhere. Just..." Ben reached a hand out to set on her shoulder. "Please come back to me." It was painful to see Gwen acting this way, knowing that even she must be appalled by her own behavior if the real her was still in there. Was she trapped in her own mind, watching an alien parasite at the controls? Ben scoured Gwen's eyes for any hint of the real her fighting, any spark of empathy or recognition or fear, anything at all to tell Ben that he wasn't alone, and he saw nothing. Before his fingers could so much as brush her sleeve, Gwen smacked his hand away and took a step back. "Lay a finger on me," she warned, "and I won't hesitate to call campus security and have you forcibly removed from the premises." "Gwen, come on." Ben thought that he might start crying, might just get on his hands and knees and beg as if that would change anything. But he didn't get the chance. "What's all the commotion about?" Kevin's voice interrupted. He shouldered his way past the small gathering of students who were watching their argument and made a beeline for Gwen's side. For a split second, Ben dared to let himself hope. And he was swiftly reminded of why that was a terrible idea when Kevin glanced over at him and scowled. "Hey, babe." Gwen softened some when she saw Kevin. She greeted him exactly as fondly as she always did, even leaning up to give him a kiss on the cheek when he set a hand on her waist. Her frown quickly returned as she glanced back over at Ben. "It's no big deal. I'm just having trouble with someone not taking a hint." "Kevin, tell her that she's being crazy," Ben shouted. He shouldn't have wasted his breath. Kevin shook his head and stepped between Gwen and Ben. "Listen, Tennyson," he said with the sort of disdain Ben hadn't gotten from him since they were kids. "She said beat it, so beat it before I make you." "We're best friends," Ben tried anyway. He couldn't quite control the edge of hysterics that leaked into his voice. "Remember? You're the one who said that. We've protected each other through the worst, Kevin. I'm the reason you got the chance to date Gwen in the first place. You at least remember that, don't you?" "No, but you know what I do remember?" Kevin made a show of cracking his knuckles. "How to kick your ass." In any other context, Kevin threatening him would be a joke. Ben would tease him about the good old days, Kevin would elbow him or sling an arm around his shoulder, and the two of them would laugh while Gwen tried to hide a smile. Ben felt like he was stuck in a nightmare. Gwen and Kevin were right in front of him, but Ben had never missed them more. "There's no need to escalate this," Elena cut in, speaking softly. "Something isn't right, Kevin. Ben is just trying to help both of you." Kevin snorted. "You mean like he helped you?" He shot back, and that... Ben winced. That was something he had told Kevin in confidence. To have it thrown in his face like that, it stung. He had always blamed himself for how things went with Elena. If Ben had been a little smarter, a little more observant, a better friend, then maybe Elena would still be human. Maybe if Ben had been a better hero, none of this would be happening. "You know that isn't fair," Elena protested, but Kevin wasn't having it. "I'm done talking," he cut her off. "Last warning, leave." Ben felt frozen. He tried to swallow, his throat painfully dry. He searched pointlessly for something to say. "Guys, I just want to..." He tried to take a step forward, and a blast of mana shaved off the tip of his shoe and left a burn mark on the ground. Gwen's eyes flashed threateningly. "Next time," she promised, "I won't miss." There was no point in continuing to push. The last thing that Ben wanted was for this to come to blows. "Fine," he said. Through his pulse hammering in his ears, his own voice sounded like a stranger's. "I'll go. But I'll be back, I swear. I won't give up on you two." He hoped that, wherever the real Gwen and Kevin were, they heard him. The Gwen and Kevin in front of him, though, were unmoved. Kevin rolled his eyes. Gwen looked like her thoughts had already moved on to something far more important. Ben didn't have the energy to pretend that it didn't hurt. He clenched his jaw, hands curling into fists as he fought off the urge to cry. Elena set a hand in the middle of his back, rubbing gentle, soothing circles. Somehow, even though she was made of microchips, her touch was warm. Ben didn't have the strength to pull away from her. "We should leave," Elena murmured. Ben didn't bother responding. He just nodded and let her lead him away. Elena found them a nice, secluded spot just off of the main campus. Ben stared off in the distance at nothing in particular, his mind spinning. A part of him still wanted to cry, but crying wouldn't solve anything. As long as Ben kept moving, he could decouple his personal feelings from the problem and focus on it like he would any other mission. He took a deep breath. "Okay," Ben said, standing up a little straighter. He addressed Elena with the same tone of voice that he would use for any of his other team members. "I don't know what's happening, so that's the first problem we need to solve. I've got plenty of enemies who are capable of mind control or making robotic replicas, so we need to be thorough." "All right." Elena's face was creased with worry. "Are you sure you're okay, though?" "What?" Ben blinked, thrown for a loop by the question. "Are you okay?" repeated Elena. "Back there, that was a lot. I know the situation can't be easy on you." She searched his face, and her expression softened. "You don't need to be in hero mode with me, Ben. I've known you since middle school. You can be honest with me." The earnest look in her gaze was too much. Ben averted his eyes. "I'm fine." He was trying to convince himself more than he was her. "And even if I wasn't, we have more important things to worry about." Elena looked disappointed. Ben swallowed down the flicker of guilt that he felt. Maybe Elena had known him once, but there were too many years and too much hurt between them now. Ben couldn't open up to her. Not when he ached to be able to open up to his friends. I just don't understand why you aren't affected by whatever's happening, Ben continued. Everyone else I know hates me, apparently, but not you. Could Elena's microchips cause something like this? Could she be controlling all of Ben's friends or have replaced them with copies? If Elena was involved in this, it would break Ben's heart again, but it wouldn't surprise him. I could never hate you, Ben. Elena tried for a smile. When he didn't return it, she let it drop and continued. Like you said earlier, there are a lot of possibilities. If we're going to eliminate them one by one, we have to start somewhere. Ben nodded. We'll start with Rook. He was the first person I noticed acting weird. Maybe he's some kind of patient zero? Good idea. Elena tried to look encouraging. And don't worry, Ben. You'll fix this. You always have before. Yeah, thanks, Elena. Ben did his best to smile. He didn't quite believe it, but he was going to have to. Even if you don't, you'll always have me, she added. Ben's smile didn't fall, but it was a close thing. He would eliminate every other option first. At the end of it all, the only possibility left, even if it hurt, had to be the truth. And Ben would move forward accordingly.